Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On tonight's show, I have a very special guest. His name is Howard de la Cruz Bancroft. And tonight we're going to talk about a subject that he has a long discussion on YouTube about. It's basically the vice or theory of everything, and he's going to explain his terminology. But are you there, Howard?
I am. Thanks. Good to be with you.
Thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. So before we get started about the subject, if you could provide the audience with a little bit about your background and how you became interested in this subject.
Well, I was one of those kids that grew up always asking questions. So my dad was in the military, and originally we were raised kind of like Roman Catholics, but without any of the statues or the other paraphernalia that normally accompany Roman Catholic Church setting. So it was kind of interesting that we had a worship manual that had the Catholic order of services and songs. It had the Protestant, which is anybody who wasn't Catholic and not Jewish, and then the Jewish order of services. And so growing up, sitting in a pew in a service, your mind tends to wander when it's the same thing every week done over and over again. And so I would take that time to look through the Armed Services Manual, Worship Manual, and ask questions related to what the differences were between the three faiths. And most of my questions really I don't think got adequate answers for me. I was also a kid who was very interested in science. I remember one of the first days I went to first grade, I was a 4-year-old in a Department of Defense school in Japan. I checked out a book on the planets. And the librarian said, "You can't check that book out." And I asked her why. She said, "Because that's too advanced for you." So I just started reading to her. First, I started explaining to her what I knew about the planets. And I read the first couple of paragraphs, and she said, "Oh, you're good. And so I actually have a really funny memory of one of my first days in school of getting a bunch of kids like me around a playground and saying, "Hey guys, this is so much fun." I go, I want to tell you something really important. And I said, 20 years from now, we're going to want to remember this. And I got this look from them like I was from another planet. And I realized right away that there are things I think that I don't think my peers were thinking. And I spent a lot of time trying to socially fit in and trying to keep a lot of my thoughts in paper and questions for adults. And I remember my mom eventually taking me to the Monsignor, which is one of the head guys at the church. And then eventually I got an audience with the Archbishop. And I think I was about maybe 10 years old or something like that. And I asked him, "Hey, is there anything wrong with the Bible?" And he goes, "No, there's nothing wrong with the Bible." I go, "Is it okay to read the Bible?" He goes, "No, yeah, it's okay to read the Bible." I said, "So if I read the Bible and I like it and there's things in it I want to follow, am I all right?" And he goes, yeah, you're fine. I go, "What if I only want to follow the things in the Bible?" And he knew where I was going with that because, there's a lot of tradition. I'm not knocking anyone or belittling or being an iconoclast, but there are things in it that were added. In fact, the Roman Catholic Church teaches that tradition is one of their main tenets, the pillars of the church.
What part of the country was this in? Where you met
say
there?
Again?
What part of the country were you in?
Sacramento at the time.
Okay.
My dad eventually retired in the Sacramento area. There were McClellan Air Force bases nearby there. And so the Archbishop turned to my mom and she says, "You know what? Why don't you take this young man with you? And I can tell that you're going to have your hands full." And he never answered the question. So it was kind of like that my entire life. I was always asking questions of faith and science, like how did science relate to faith? And I would get the common answer that, well, you just have to believe, or you just have to have faith, or it's just a matter of faith. And in my opinion, I grew up believing that all truth was God's truth. And if it was math, then it was God's math. If it was anything that was reproducible in a controlled environment with measurable and predictable results, that was science. And so I ended up being involved later on, making a decision to give my life to someone that I believe could give me the love that I needed to reach out to other people, because I found out that I wasn't really able to connect with other people. That was kind of selfish. And I knew that that wasn't going to be the kind of lifestyle I wanted to be. That would be a lonely life. It wouldn't matter how rich or famous you were, but if you couldn't connect and you didn't have love for someone else, then your life was meaningless. At least that's the conclusion I came to at about 16 years of age. So I decided to go, I was going to be an attorney, studying law, but I saw this movie called Paper Chase. I don't know if you remember that from a long time.
I think so. Was that Ryan O'Neal? Is that right?
Now I'm not sure.
What's Paper Chase about? I can't remember.
And in the movie, these guys really had to study. And in public school, I really didn't have good study habits. So, to make a long story short, I did not think I'd be able to make the cut, because I couldn't. School was easy, and so I never learned to study. I didn't have any study habits at all.
Oh, right.
So
Paper Chase was about a first-year law student at Harvard. I remember. Yes.
Yeah. And so I ended up going to a community college financially to try to knock out a bunch of humanities. Unlike some of these kids who are $200,000 in debt when they get out of university, and they can't even pay for their student loans. So while I was there, I took a course called The Bible as Literature. And it was mainly just a secular understanding of the Bible. And I became intrigued with it because the Bible made a claim that said that, heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words will not pass away. And I thought, wow, that is quite the claim. And at the time, I decided to explore those elements of my faith. So I ended up going from the community college to a Bible college. And I got my Bachelor's of Science in Theology at Bethany. It's a Christian university out in the Santa Cruz, California area. Nice. And then I went on I was going to go into the military. My dad had suggested going in the Army first, which I did not like the Army. And he wanted me to go to OCS, which is Officer Candidate School. But I did not like it, made plans right away, found out that there was a way that I could go to seminary. I could get commissioned as an Air Force. I wanted to go in the Air Force because that's how he retired. And that was, every branch of the military has a certain personality. And the Air Force has more of an office type environment than it does, a slug it out, shoot 'em up, bang, bang kind of philosophy. And so I got my commission. I got out of the Army. I became a second lieutenant in the Air Force, and I went to Austin Presbyterian Theological Center. And there my science mind started to kick in. In fact, in one class, I have to tell you, it was really interesting. It was redaction criticism, and you've heard of that before. That's where people say, well, what were the real words that Jesus said? Let's try to synthesize all the different gospel accounts and find out exactly what we think is in common. And I made this comment. I said, well, what if he actually did say these things in different times, in different places, and they're recorded by different people, but they're all true? Then we've spent our entire time in this class not willing to consider any other options or any other presuppositions. And, it seems like we didn't really learn what we were supposed to learn. We've missed out. And the professor, who he had graduated from the University of, I don't know if it's called the Chicago Theological Seminary. It's a liberal seminary. Anyways, he was so angry, he took an eraser, he threw it at me, and he said, get out of here right now. And so, it's one of those things. Remember, I told you I try to say things and they don't always go over real well. So I ended up leaving there, and I went to Golden Gate Baptist Theological Seminary near San Francisco for 3 years. It's now called Gateway Seminary. They've actually moved their main campus down to Southern California. But anyways, to make a long story short, I was in the Air Force chaplain program. I had done a couple of tours, one at Holloman, which is in New Mexico, and one in Travis. And I was getting ready to graduate. And I had an argument with my mother-in-law in the summer about problems that were happening in their family. There were some dysfunction. So they had this dysfunction going on in their family. And to make a long story short, I said something some things that I probably shouldn't have said to her. Not mean or nasty. I just said something about, I don't know about you, but I wear the pants in my family. And she just looked at me. She was yelling at me at the time. She stopped yelling. She goes, "We'll see about that." So I forgot all about that. I thought that I was the big man on campus, and I handled that with the witty saying and forgot all about it. About 3 months later, they come out for Thanksgiving and said, "Well, we're going to take the kids and we're going to visit the grandparents in Oregon." And they never came back. Never came back. That was the end of that marriage. It was the end of I never really ever saw my kids like a normal father again because of the acrimonious custody battle. The kids were abducted, but her father and her attorney were able to make things in such a way that it was so difficult that by the time I was able to see them, they had already convinced the kids that I didn't care, which wasn't true. So to make a long story short, that was the end of that career, and I was in IT, information technology. I had just invented a microprocessor for a cutting device, and it was really amazing. And I couldn't even follow that through. We created the device for about $50 in parts, and we honestly could sell it reasonably for $15,000. And the reason why is because in these large manufacturing machines, they have engineering flaws, and they have these lucrative service contracts. Now, this was in 1986. They were charging $1,000 an hour to fix this machine. And this device fixed that engineering flaw so that instead of them having to 2 or 3 times a year pay $15,000 to $30,000 to service this machine, this solved the problem. And the guy who was actually running a company was the one who suggested what it should be priced at. And he said, "Dude, you are on your way. You're a millionaire," because they have these, I don't know if you've ever seen them, but the large newspapers and magazines, those big rolls of paper.
Yes.
Those are the cutters that they used. And they ran 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And so you know that if they were able to charge $1,000 an hour, $15,000 to fix the problem wasn't a big deal. And so, anyways, make that story to finalize it. It was, I couldn't continue emotionally with my kids abducted and taken. It was very difficult for me to continue. So I got into the IT world, and I had already been dabbling in it when I was in seminary back then. You probably remember this, but they didn't have Windows interfaces and characters in Greek and Hebrew. You just had regular ASCII characters on the screen. Remember that? I had a K-Pro 2 that had WordStar, and you had the program disk in A and the data disk in B. And I wrote my first involvement with computers. I wrote a program using GW Basic that was able to use characters to convert those symbols. A time in my life where I just couldn't pursue anything else, decided to end up moving to New Mexico so I could be near my kids in hopes that we'd have a normal relationship. But that didn't work, and I ended up teaching at a community college, teaching computers, by the way. I had been involved enough with computers at that point where I was able to demonstrate proficiency, and I had proficiency based on my business experience, which is real important at a community college. So I ended up working at the college, teaching 4 years. Then I got tagged by the state when they took over a school district financially to run their computer system. And I ran Los Alamos, and everyone knows about Los Alamos because that's where they, of course, invented the atomic bomb.
Right, Manhattan Project, yeah.
Exactly. But in addition to that, they had one of the most lucrative contracts with the Department of Energy to fund public schools. This was back in 1986. They had fiber to the desktop. Now, that was unheard of for any other school district in the country at the time. A 1 gigabit connection.
Wow.
And so that was kind of fun, but I ended up getting involved in politics, and I decided to start my own company and doing consulting and through a nonprofit, actually. And so then by then I was starting to get involved. I wrote a Medicaid reimbursement program. So what I'm saying is that I took this biblical background and this IT and my science interest, and I started to see how they combined and linked. And I started to do some research for a book that I wanted to write based on carbon nanotubes using graphene. And I actually explained this, and I mentioned that in the YouTube video, that research led me to some conclusions of how I could scientifically describe what I see as discrepancies and anomaly in the codes that make up everything. So that included both DNA. A lot of times we refer to it as junk DNA. And so I have a theory now that makes everything that we now currently believe totally obsolete. So all of our current theories, whether it's the Big Bang or the superstring theory, they all deal with time, space, and matter.
Okay.
And I actually think that is after the fact, that what precedes time, space, and matter is information, code, and word.
Okay.
And so that is all the quarks, all the bosons, all the leptons, they have to know where to go, how to fit, how to interact. All of that is information. So at the center of all of that, of all the functioning, we can see using math. Math gives us an explanation for how things work. But interesting enough, in the book and the way I describe it in the movie, these scientists were creating mathematical formulas and programs, computer programs, to figure out what would be the optimum growth environment for these carbon nanotubes. Because, you grow them kind of like crystal.
Gotcha.
And you can vary pressure and temperature and gases and electromagnetic fields and change the way that the lattice is for the nanotubes, the way they look and the way they actually function. So when the scientists, the way to describe it, looked at the actual real live analog carbon nanotubes that were grown in this environment, and they compared them to what they expected them to look like in the mathematical formulas and in the algorithms they use and the computer program, they noticed there's a discrepancy. And you know this too. When you use electron microscopy, don't you notice how strange everything looks the smaller you get, how jagged it looks and how asymmetrical it looks? And so I personally ran into the same thing. So I talked doing this research to some quantum physicists at Los Alamos Labs and Sandia Labs. And there are some premier labs in the country for some of the research they're doing.
Sure.
One of these guys is probably one of the top 10 quantum physicists in the world. And he said that those are just normal discrepancies. Those are normal variations. And I said, I don't see that. And in fact, and I just told him in the movie, and you know this, I think it's within 3 nanometers now that they're running into the problem with Moore's law, because the current transistors are so small that now the anomalies, the asymmetrical patterns on the substrata layers are starting to cause interference. In other words, they're bleeding over, the voltages are lost, and so now you can't maintain the values, the voltages you need for maintaining zeros or one values. And so instead of going horizontal, they're having to go vertical now. I don't know if you know that, but that's
No, I wasn't aware.
That's the latest thing in computer chip development.
Oh, right. They're starting to layer them. Yes, I'm familiar with that.
Right.
Yeah.
And so and when I talked to this quantum physicist, I explained to him, I said, look, that isn't normal because it will change the electromagnetic characteristics of the carbon. So if the electricity is flowing in a certain pattern and it expects to be in a certain design, it's either going to be a conductor or it's going to be a resistor. And it is no longer acceptable. Those variations must be accounted for. And so in the book, I explained that I am able to extrapolate that, and based on my findings in DNA and based upon my findings in noise and the microwave background emissions that we see, that it looks like all randomness, all chaos, all noise, all static, and all asymmetry appear to be signs of malware or a virus-like function in the pattern and the code that makes up everything. And so that changes that's a whole new paradigm, because you'll notice now when we talk about time, space, and matter, they'll talk about the way the world functions, but they're dealing with something that's already been, and I don't want to use this word the wrong way, but created means it happened. In other words, it evolved, it developed, whatever word. I don't care what word you use. It doesn't matter to me. The point is that what you see was made up of things that are not seen. It's that
Gotcha.
information.
So you're saying that underneath all tangible, even scientifically ascertainable matter, there's a program. Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Yes.
Right. And the problem with the current simulation theory that's out there now is it does not account for a virus in the code. It appears to be that I keep looking every day, and William, if you can find somebody, let me know. But my information's all been copyrighted. It's all been protected by the Writers Guild of America West. This has been over a year that I did this. Mm-hmm. I appear to be the only person who can definitively offer that plausible theory that the simulation theory has a virus in it. So a lot of people believe that this functions like a computer, but they don't understand the randomness, noise, chaos, static disorder, asymmetry part of it. So you'll hear guys arguing for either symmetry or asymmetry, like the chaos effect is a theory, the butterfly effect, right. And that is an emphasis on the virus, but it is not an emphasis on how they both link together. And then you hear a theory that people say that the virus created this. But the point is that a virus only exists to reproduce itself at the destruction of the host. It has no life in and of itself. It links to organisms, biological or otherwise, and then it can function. And so I actually call it a fake seed. It's like an artificial seed, the counterfeit seed. Seed has the actual capabilities for creating life. Right. Just like even a seed of a man and an egg of a woman, when they connect together, then biological life begins to function and it begins to happen. Just like when you put the seed in the ground, it has the capabilities for growing, but in the right conditions, then the biological life begins to manifest itself. There doesn't appear to be anybody right now who is adequately using that kind of explanation.
Gotcha. So you're saying that aside from the time-space matter analysis, there is an information and program, and also working within that is a virus.
Correct.
Gotcha.
And I link that, much like C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien, I link that to historically the biblical narrative. And what I say is, because remember my background, I have that systematic theology working there. I say that God, and I use that term between you and I, I'm just going to say in a broad sense.
Gotcha.
The idea of a superior being, and you know how some people want to call him extraterrestrial or they want to call him something else. I don't care what they call him. The point is, whoever wrote this program, whoever put this program in place, it seems to match the biblical narrative that, in fact, that at one time this was programmed without the virus being active. And I speculate, and I say I have to speculate because when I don't know for sure, I can't explain it. I'm just going to say I'm speculating. But it appears to me that that matches the definition of the sin and the fall of man. So in my movie, the way I describe it, I set this scene up, and I'll just replay it for you.
What's the name of the movie?
The Vitruvian Code Project.
Gotcha.
And that's just the working title for now.
And the Vitruvian Code references?
Well, the Vitruvian Man is Da Vinci's drawing of what they call the golden ratio and mathematical symmetry that was apparent in nature. And I actually say that the man of virtue is the universal programmer.
Gotcha.
And in Hebrew, it's called Ein Sof Metaknet, means infinite programmer. Funny story, when I was looking for these names, I wanted to find old Hebrew names. I found Yoda, and I found a bunch of other things, and I guess that's where George Lucas was looking for information as well.
Interesting.
Old Hebrew terminology and old Hebrew word. So in the movie, I say that this being, he's called a messenger class being, goes to the universal programmer, and he says, hey, I noticed the code that you use is different than the code that I use. You gave me this limited, goody two-shoe code, and I see what you write with, what you use is unlimited, and it has good and evil in it. And I want that code. And the universal programmer tells him, you can't handle that code, to borrow a line from A Few Good Men. And he says, well, why not? And he says, because we're the programmers. And we program everything. It's a reflection of who we are. And we know good and evil, but it doesn't bother us. And so when we write a program, or we create a program, or we program a program, it reflects who we are and has good and evil in it. And you are in the program. You have a beginning. And so it's like an if-then loop in a computer. If it matches the conditions, the statement becomes active. He says the potential for evil, and I usually hold a set of keys up, and I say the potential for evil, and I drop the keys. So, here's a bottle, right? So this has potential energy in it. When I drop the bottle, it becomes kinetic. So when I call him Hillel, the messenger class being, when he accesses the good and evil code, he corrupts him, because now the evil that was potential became kinetic, and then it became active. It was a reflection of the programmers, and now it became active because he's in the program. And in the story, I make that parallel to kind of like Satan. He's like the great hacker, and the Godhead is universal programmers, and the virus is sin. And then Satan goes to Adam and Eve, the prototype people, and I make an inference to some biological interface that has to do with the plants. And to make a long story short, they get corrupted, but everything in their program gets corrupted as well. So, for example, you've heard of Minecraft, right?
Of course, yes.
Well, you can create a map of Minecraft. They're called Minecraft maps. And that is the world that you're going to then have that character existing.
Right.
And those characters exist according to the rules that you put in place for that map. And I speculate and I say that matches the biblical narrative where it says that God gave them this domain and everything, and they under their authority. So it stands to reason that if that being became, those class of beings, the caretakers, I call them, the humans, became corrupted, then everything that was under their authority became corrupted as well. And yes, I say that is why everything you see, every star, every quasar, every black hole, every object on Earth, every microscopic object, even leptons and quarks, everything the virus has affected it.
Gotcha. So you relate to this virus as being associated with the fall of man.
Yeah, and I think this is scientific evidence. I think that, and I tell young people this because this message, I think, is catered for Generation Z kids more than anybody else because they think in terms of computers, right, especially digital electronic devices. So if I frame that message in that context, it makes more sense to them. I'm finding that these kids, when you use words like God and Jesus and the Bible, they dismiss you. It's almost like they have a barrier around them that's been enacted by society and the structure of what they've learned.
They've never grown up in an environment without electronics. Like, I actually remember not having, DVD. I remember VHS, Sony Walkmans. These guys they've always had a phone or something that is an interface between themselves and a reality.
Right, and we know they're different because their choice of interface is electronic and digital. It's a computer. Because you see them in restaurants, everywhere, in places gathering, and they're not talking to each other. They're Snapchatting, Instagramming, and texting each other, and they're right there. So if they were to be given a choice, and I've asked many of them, if they were to be given a choice to live full time in a virtual reality world where they could do whatever they want, they would choose that world. They would literally be willing to be paralyzed and do nothing but exist to only function in that virtual reality world. There's never been a generation like that ever willing to do.
No. That's amazing, yeah.
And so, but that's caused a lot of problems because they've short-circuited the normal relationship process. And so they lack a lot of coping skills. They have a lot of emotional issues. They are the highest incidence of any generation that we can measure statistically to have the highest incidence of suicide, depression, and violence, internal or external. I mean, a lot of those games, and I'm not being mean to anybody, but the first shooter games, they call them, aren't really helping develop a positive morality to thinking about caring for other people.
Right.
So I'm not knocking them, but I am only saying that they're not inputting positive morality in how to help other people. And so that's what I say the virus affects everything. I actually believe there's no amorality, not even in machines. That if you don't input morality into it, that those machines would eventually destroy you. And Elon Musk and all these guys, they say the same thing. I don't think they say it for the same reason. In fact, I'm hoping someday I have conversations with these guys. But the point is if we were able to emulate artificial intelligence, and I describe it as three things: the ability to think for yourself, the ability to decide for yourself, and the ability to learn from a collective memory and experiences. If we could embed that in a computer and a robot, those robots would get rid of us as humans because we're inefficient, we're violent, we're selfish. I mean, when you look at the history of the human race, it's not a good history.
Right.
And then the way that people look at the way we treat maybe just our resources around us. I'm not a tree hugger by any sense, but at the same time, I know I'm called to be a steward and to take care of things. And so I don't think putting toxic materials in the ground is a good thing. I don't think poisoning things is the way to go because ultimately it's counterproductive.
Right.
So with that in mind, I've developed a science-based morality. I think I'm the first person in history to offer it. And the reason why I'm the first person is because my science says that the coding has a mission. In other words, the code originally was designed so we could be fruitful and multiply, and we could have dominion. Okay, those are the basic tenets of the code originally. Then when the virus came in, that code got corrupted, and then there was death, and there was disease, there was destruction, there was selflessness. Yeah. Right, all of these things ended up happening. So my science-based morality says anything that furthers and develops the intention and purposes of the code originally is morally good. Anything that's counterproductive to the code is morally bad. And so it puts morality in a different term, and a different dimension, a different way of explaining context. And so people don't have to agree with me. I'm not asking them to agree with me. I'm asking them to just see that there's consistency in my thought and in my theory, that this theory covers every category of science, all of philosophy, all of theology. It connects all the dots. I actually believe it's the first scientific-based theory that gives you not only a consistent worldview, and explains the past, the present, and the future, but it also gives you the context for filling in the dots for things that you don't know. And so if you have a consistent enough theory, when you don't know something, you can go from point A to point C, and you can kind of fill in the dots. And as long as you're consistent, then you're probably on good ground. And ultimately, and here's what's so important, this has an application to your daily life.
And what's that? Yeah.
Well, the purpose is to pursue selfless love. This dimension was programmed by someone, or I believe programmers, who did it selflessly, thinking about someone else. The idea of the gospel is that the universal programmer comes into the program to bring the antivirus so that we can pass through the last virus filter, which is death, so we don't get quarantined and separated, so we can get to the next virus-free dimension to restore that, but he did it selflessly. He gave of himself. He thought of others. I actually believe that is the reason we are here. We are here to learn about selfless love, how to care for others, how to put them before ourselves. And in that pursuit, then we will look at things like the biblical narrative and see the value of it, not only scientifically, but also in the conduct and way we treat each other. So this is the first theory that is not only consistent, it's science-based, it's a worldview, but it also has a daily application to my life. So I'm driving down the highway, right? You've had this experience. You live in Southern California, brother. I don't know how you do it.
It takes a lot of patience.
These people literally will be driving 100 miles an hour, especially there's the road that goes from Victorville and it goes down into
San Bernardino,
it goes through the mountains,
mm-hmm.
and it is the scariest thing in the entire world. The entire traffic, 3 lanes or whatever it is, 4 in some places, that they're traveling. I've been 100 miles an hour, not trying to get run over. And because it kind of goes downhill there once you get, and so they're
exactly what you're talking about.
And then all of a sudden, something will happen in the freeway. They get in I guess it's a San Fernando Valley when it starts to level out.
I believe it's San Fernando. No, I think it's San Bernardino.
Yeah,
I think you're going into the Inland Empire.
Right.
Yeah,
right, San Bernardino, and it gets to the flat area, and then all of a sudden it starts to meet some on ramps, and the traffic just grinds to a halt.
Right.
So now you just went from 100 miles an hour to like 5. And in your rear view mirror are guys still doing 80, 85, and they come right up on you and they'll change lanes at the last second. And you don't know, are they on their phones? You don't know if they're paying attention. It's the scariest thing that I've ever encountered in my driving. And my point is initially that fear, and it is fear, if you've ever been in a crash. Now, most people, maybe they haven't and they're not afraid, but I've been hit by 2 red light runners. I was in a head-on collision. I've been run off the road. I mean, just things that happen to you. And so that my world's a little colored. I'm a little hypersensitive. I actually became a reserve sheriff deputy in my county for a while just so that I could call in bad drivers and get something happen. If that makes any sense.
It does. It makes perfect sense. I wish I could do that. My God. I'd be on the phone all day here in L.A. Holy smokes.
Yeah,
I'd
you know
make
what?
10 calls a day.
It is awful. It is awful. And so to try to concise or to summarize that, this theory tells me that there's a program for me and that this is an opportunity for me to trust the programmer, and that if he's going to protect me, he's going to protect me. And I need to take confidence and assurance in that program. And then I need to care about this other person, even though emotionally I don't at the time. And I'm the kind of person that, I don't know if you know this, but there's actually something they call the warrior gene, that it's scientifically been evidenced that people react to fear differently. People who are policemen, people who are soldiers, people who are firemen, that they react to fear. It energizes them, and they call it the fight or the flight syndrome.
Right.
It's where your amygdala is activated. So people with the warrior gene, they are energized, and their adrenaline kicks in, and they're ready to fight. They're ready to go. They're on it, man. When you shoot, for example, if you shoot a weapon in a crowded room, most people are hiding and ducking. But there are going to be a few of those people in there that they're like, what the heck's going on? I'm going to take this guy out. And so that's something unique in particular, and it's great for those circumstances, but it's not so good when you're driving in a car.
Right.
Because you literally want to go down and chase the guy and punch him and beat him up. But you couldn't, of course, you'd never get anywhere in L.A. You'd be beating people up and getting arrested.
Yeah, it would be Mad Max. Mad Max.
Right, exactly. So this theory says you trust the programmer and you act in selfless love to care for that person more than you care for yourself. And that you cannot do in your own power. And that's where this theory says you must rely on the universal program to give you what you need in that moment. And so many times, in fact, it happens all day. It even happened this morning going to see someone. I had to ask, and you can call it prayer if you want. I had to ask to love that other person that I really wanted to beat up. I wanted to punch them out. If I had a chance, that's how I was feeling at the moment. But when I ask for that, that is what I think I'm programmed, the optimum program to run. It does change me, because remember I talked about thinking, deciding, and then learning? Once you decide that you want to love someone, and then you start to think about that may actually be possible, then you can actually learn to do it. But it isn't just positive thinking, if that makes sense. It is relying on the fact that you believe that this world is programmed, that there is an optimum program for you, and that you need to operate in that program, and you're willing to operate in that program and do something that your emotions tell you not to do. And that is counterintuitive. And so it's a message, and it matches the biblical narrative, but it puts it in a scientific terms, if that makes sense.
No, it does, definitely.
I'm doing it for these kids as well, and I have to practice it myself. So I think that's what's so different about this. I don't think there's ever been anyone to do that and explain it that way.
I've never heard of it. And you title it the acronym VICE, right? Virus in the Code of Everything?
Right.
All right, gotcha. So,
yeah, because vice is a bad thing. And
right, no, it's perfect. It works. It's an acronym that works.
So that's what this is all about, and trying to get this message out. And, we're real excited. It's starting to gain momentum. Your being on your show is part of the momentum. Being on our the largest radio station in our state recently.
Oh, nice. Good.
I just connected with a guy who is a Hollywood producer and a director, and he wants to he's actually been reviewing the YouTube. I just talked with him yesterday about it. People who are another guy's actually from your part of the town. He lives out here. He produces radio shows here. I was on one of the radio shows, and he said to me, which I appreciate, he said, I know that this message is going someplace because it's true. And he goes, I'm going to do everything I can to help get this message out. And so I kind of feel like a surfer that I'm just going to ride the wave. And I do feel like I was programmed, if you want to call that, for a reason. And that is because of my systematic theology, this theory has to not only be scientific, but it has to be theologically accurate. Because I think even the biblical narrative, there is a lot of evidence that it has symmetry in it, patterns in it. Some people call it codes. Right. But I think they can misunderstand the purpose. The purpose isn't, this is not a Gnostic interpretation. It's not something that favors the intelligence. It says the purpose is to act in selfless love, to think of others before yourself. And that's the emphasis of this. And if you think about it, even a mentally retarded person who has a very low intelligence and IQ has a great capacity to love. I have been around some Down syndrome people that just being in their presence brings such peace and such warmth and such comfort that is an indication to me that the playing field is leveled by making that the goal, not intelligence.
Interesting.
And so I'm trying to use intelligence to connect with people who would reject the traditional understanding, but at the same time, that is not the emphasis, if that makes sense.
No, it does, definitely. So you believe that selfless love is the highest ideal, transcends, the quest for knowledge or intelligence or whatever.
Right. And it's not just loving like, about Greek, so about there's eros,
right, eros, logos.
There's phileo, which is friendly, neighborly love. There's also estorgo, and there's agape, which is the highest. I think that terminology means selfless is a different way to think of it because it's talking about putting the needs of someone else before yourself. Gotcha. That we can all grasp. If you just say the word love, that's so ethereal nowadays. It could mean anything.
It's used in so many different contexts as well. It's even the New Agers used love, or the Hindus, and all kinds of things. So it's used in different environments, I would say.
Right. So putting the needs of someone else before yourself gives you a context. Because let's say you're a politician and your goal is to get elected. If you operate in selfless love, you are now thinking about your constituents above your own desires. If you're a corporate CEO, you're now thinking about the needs of your workers. If you're a philanthropist or a Wall Street person and your stocks, you're now thinking about what are the needs of the clients or the people I represent or the people who work in those companies. It changes. It gives you a different paradigm. And I think it more clearly enunciates what the specifics of the kind of love that's needed here. And I actually speculate in my book, the first book in the Vice Theory, but also in the movie, that selfless love slightly accelerates you in time. And the biblical parallel to that is operating with discernment. That when you are functioning outside of your own selfish desires and you're seeking the needs of others, the Holy Spirit gives you wisdom and insight and discernment that you would not have. And so I speculate also that we live in a time delay, that just like a digital video recorder in a surveillance system, there's a time delay so that it can accommodate the 2 or 3 seconds before the motion happens.
Interesting.
And I think this world is in a delay. And so when you see someone who's a terrorist, by the time he pushes the button on the bomb, it's too late. That person needed to be reached before that. And we need to operate ahead of the time-space curve to really make the changes in the world around us. And in the movie, I set up something called the suicide bomber scene, where actually one of the members of the Vitruvian Code Project, we call it, is able to connect to this young man by having discernment before he pushes the trigger on the explosive device.
When do you think that movie will be available?
Oh, I'm just guessing. I imagine it's probably 2 to 3 years.
Gotcha. But you say the script is fully written?
The book is written.
Gotcha.
A screenwriter then takes it and puts in things like camera angles and other information that needs to be added. Characters, the way that they stand, even all of that stuff has to be developed. But I have that. Do
you have a book that's available for people to read?
Both of these have not been published yet. I think I mentioned about the producer from the radio show saying you need to get your audiobook out. He says, From what I heard, I think this was the first year that audiobooks surpassed printed books.
I do believe that they're taking over. I had a guest who said that his Audible book sold more than his printed book. So he had more readers or more listeners.
And so that's going to be my first emphasis. I have somebody working right now on that to try to get that to come to pass. And I'm thinking that's going to be probably somewhere in the next month or so.
Gotcha. Oh, good. We are at the 48-minute mark. So maybe it's time if I didn't ask any questions or if there's something you would like to cover or want to provide a summation, go ahead and do it, please.
Yeah, my main thing is I think what I'm going to do is in my YouTube broadcast, rather than trying to put a lot of production value into it because I don't have that yet, is to take other people's videos, because I've been watching YouTube a lot. And so I'll watch all the latest theories. So the superstring theory, or there's something called the E8 dimensional structures theory. You probably heard of that. There's a lot of these theories out. And what I want to do is just take them and not bash them, but show that the errors of the thinking in a way so that it gives credibility. So, for example, in the Big Bang Theory, one of the things it talks about is they can't accommodate for appears to be equal heating of deep space. You've heard about that, like 3 degrees above absolute zero. Mm-hmm. Also, can't accommodate for what they call the microwave background radiation. Well, in this theory, it fills all the dots. It fills all the gaps because it says, look, all that noise, all that static, all that you hear is evidence of the virus active in everything. It's out there. Also, this matches the appearance of the universe at this time because everything is not symmetrical, but it was designed to be so. And so you're going to find consistency, if that makes sense.
I think so, yeah.
You're going to find consistency makes sense when you had initially a symmetrical based program for the virus to just affect it in different pockets in different ways. And that's what would explain the even heating, if that makes sense, the appearance. But when you go to certain areas, the heat temperature is not consistent. So you can find inconsistencies, but you overall find some level of consistency that then violates if you're trying to create a theory made up only inconsistencies. Does that make sense?
I think so. And where is your YouTube channel if people want to watch your the lecture that I watched?
The way that I tell people is to just, I was a guest lecturer, I did a guest lecture at the University of New Mexico. So if they just go to UNM lecture and put in the word Vice, UNM lecture Vice, they'll see the Vitruvian Code Project channel. Gotcha. And I think it's really just Vitruvian Code Project. I think that those, just spell it out. And they go
Vitruvian is spelled it's Vitruvian, right? Vitruvian?
No, Vitruvian is like Vitruvi, kind of like virtue. Yeah, virtue. Let me look it up because in English it doesn't carry the R with it.
Vitruvian, Vitruvian, I think is it?
Yeah.
Vitruvian.
So Vitruvian Code Project, or just type UNM Lecture Vice, and they'll see that.
And do you have any other social media? Are you on Facebook or Twitter or anything like that?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook. So same thing, Vitruvian Code Project. If you just type facebook.com and Vitruvian Code Project, you'll get that page. I'm also on SoundCloud.
Oh, nice.
And that's something they can actually get to now. It's an audio, but it's using text to speech. Gotcha. So it isn't. For example, Amazon won't let you sell an audiobook using text to speech. It has to be a real person.
Gotcha.
So that's the dilemma in using that. But you will find the Vice Theory and the Vitruvian Code Project on audio on SoundCloud.
Gotcha.
If you just put in Vice Theory or Vitruvian Code Project, you'll find it. And you can I think you can download SoundCloud. I don't know. I don't.
I think you're right.
But those are what I'm using. I do have Twitter, but I hardly ever use it. All those other things, I'm going to have to get some young smart guy person to handle all of that. My main concern right now is I interact with the latest of current theories and try to come up with a way to respond to them. That's what I spend most of my time right now.
Gotcha.
So if there's something you see, the latest thing, hey, just bounce it off me, and I'll give you at least I'll offer an explanation.
Sounds good. Howard De La Cruz Bancroft, thank you so much for being on the show.
Appreciate it. Thanks, William.
All right.